Hello everybody, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my first ever anime review. The anime I will be talking about today is Orb on the Movements of the Earth. Now, this is a very complicated show to talk about for my first ever review, so I apologize if this is scuffed. I'm just trying to have some fun and learn how to make videos. This video is unscripted. I have a couple little notes and bullet points, and I've kind of thought about what I wanted to talk about, so I want to apologize in advance if I stutter or talk over myself or go on tangents or repeat myself or make mistakes. I just want to talk about it from the heart, and hopefully that'll resonate with you guys. Now, before I start this review, it will contain spoilers for Orbs on the Movement of the Earth. I implore you to please watch this show spoiler free. It can be enjoyed so much more. Orb has quickly become one of my favorite shows after watching it, so I'm excited to talk about it with all of you. Without further ado, let's talk about Orb on the Movements of the Earth. I want to give a brief plot summary for people who either haven't watched the show recently or have not watched the show at all and did not hear the spoiler warning. Orb is a science and historical show set in 15th century Poland. It is about the theory of heliocentrism, which is that the sun is at the center of the universe and not the Earth, as was believed back in the day. We follow multiple main characters over a 35-year time span. We start out with Rafal, who is a child prodigy about to start attending university. He meets a heretic who introduces him to the idea of heliocentrism. Rafal then follows this idea of eventually killing himself after he is captured by inquisitors. We then follow Okchi and Badeni. Okchi is a mercenary and Badeni is a church priest. These two perfect heliocentrism. They finalize the theory, they write a book about it, and they're the people that progress heliocentrism the most and that we spend the most time with. After that, we follow Draka, who is a nomad that gets intertwined with heliocentrism after finding the book that Badeni and Okchi wrote. The final character that we follow is Albert, who is actually a real-life historical figure. I want to keep the plot summary brief so we can move on to the actual discussions about the show. That's the gist of the characters and how the show progresses. Now I want to talk about my two favorite characters in the entire show, which is Novak, who is the main antagonist, and Yolenta, who is a character that appears in both the second chapter with Okchi and Badeni and the third chapter with Draka. First, I'm going to talk about Yolenta, who is a female priest, later turned leader of the Heretic Liberation Front. Now, Yolenta originally helps out Okchi and Badeni craft the original theory of heliocentrism. She is also the daughter of Novak, who I'll talk about in a bit. Yolenta starts out as this innocent and cheerful child. She is only 14 when she's working with Badeni and Okchi. And it's really interesting to see her grow from chapter 2 to chapter 3. I think we see her life sort of fall apart. We see her go from a super happy, cheerful, innocent individual in chapter 2 to becoming a jaded, angry murderer in chapter 3. After the main events of chapter 2, she is captured as a heretic and tortured by a priest and two inquisitors that are working under Novak. She is captured because of her relation to Novak. Novak is an inquisitor who has a lot of influence, and this priest captures his daughter and tries her as a heretic in order to reduce Novak's influence. She escapes, but her death is faked in order to make Novak sad and lower his reputation. But after she is tortured and tries a heretic, she goes on the run for 25 years, eventually founding the Heretic Liberation Front. Now, Yolenta, especially in chapter 3, presents a really interesting worldview of how convictions and how your goals can sort of negatively affect you. We see that her conviction in heliocentrism, her conviction to prove this theory, has turned her into a much more angry person, a person that can't find much fulfillment in life anymore. She delivers an entire beautiful speech to Draka about how convictions aren't all that they're chalked up to be, how convictions can ruin your life just as much as they can benefit you. Yolenta gives her life in order to save some of the Heretic Liberation Front members and Draka, and allows them to escape. She blows herself up in an amazing scene where she sees her father Novak after 25 years of not seeing him. Now let's talk about my favorite character and one of the greatest antagonists in modern anime. Now Novak is the main antagonist of Orb, And he has this presence that I think only compares to like some of the greatest villains in anime and film and TV in general. Like, whenever he appears in a scene, you never know what's going to happen. And it's really interesting to see him develop from chapter 1 to chapter 2 to chapter 3. In chapter 1, we see Novak as an up and coming inquisitor who discovers Rafal and takes him as a heretic, but we already see him, accustomed to killing. But when Rafal kills himself in order to preserve the knowledge and secrets of heliocentrism, we see Novak taken aback by this. We see him genuinely, he feels bad, he gets scarred by what Rafal does. Then in chapter 2, we see a much more detached, a much more emotionless Novak. The only time he shows emotion is when he's with his daughter Yolenta. We see him torture people with no remorse, no emotion. The only thing he's invested in is heliocentrism. The scene where Novak interrupts dinner between Yolenta, Badeni, and Akchi is one of the greatest scenes in modern anime. We don't know what's going to happen when he just appears abruptly, but he's all cheerful and happy, and we let our guards down a bit. But Akchi's on edge as he knows what Novak can do. He's seen Novak before. And then dinner ends. Novak and Yolenta walk off. Akchi, along with me, and I'm sure the rest of you that have watched the show, let out a sigh of relief now that Novak is gone. And then he comes back. Novak leaves Yolenta to walk home alone and asks about Akchi and Badeni's research. And that's when we all immediately hold our breaths again, knowing that stuff's about to go down. And then Novak starts to search their barn, their research, and we think everything's safe again when he says it's safe. And then he sees the necklace that has been passed from Rafal to them, and we know it's over for them. We know everything's about to happen, and everything does happen. Novak and Akchi lose their lives because of that necklace, which I'll talk more about in a sec. Novak, in chapter 3, after losing his daughter, after Novak catches these two, we see him lose his daughter. Only days after, he watches it as what he thinks is his daughter gets burned at the stake. But he doesn't release any emotion. But we see over the next 25 years, he's become a drunken mess. His life has completely fallen apart around him. And him in chapter 3, I think, is the most interesting Novak that we see, because we see this man's entire life unravel because of heliocentrism. His final scene, which is the scene in the church, this is after Novak has chased down the Heretic Liberation Front, has chased down Draka to this church, where he finds Draka negotiating with a church priest. They find them talking amicably about heliocentrism, and this throws him off the deep end. But even worse, that priest is the same one responsible for Yolenta's apparent death. He's responsible for Yolenta having to run away and being forced into exile. And then that priest shatters Novak's entire world. He tells him that the only reason Novak was hired, the only reason that he's been chasing heliocentrism for 35 years of his life, the only reason he's lost his daughter, he's lost his entire life basically, was because of one priest's vendetta against heliocentrism. One priest personally didn't believe in it, and he set Novak out on the 35-year wild goose chase, basically. Most other priests, most other religious figures believe that heliocentrism could be possible within interpretations of Holy Scripture. Meanwhile, Novak has been chasing people down for 35 years for something that could be accepted within the bounds of Christianity, and we see his entire world shattered. He lights this church on fire, kills the priest, which he would have never done before. We see him stab a child, which he definitely wouldn't have done before. We saw how he reacted when Rafal died. He doesn't want to stab this child, but yet he does, because his entire world has been shattered by this revelation. He sets the church ablaze and lays down to die. And in his final moments, he sees a vision of Rafal. They talk, and then his final moment, after Yolenta had blown herself up, for some reason Novak kept the severed hand that landed right in front of him. He kept the gloves of his daughter, the last thing that he had to remember her by. He puts them together and they fit perfectly. So at least we know that Novak dies with one little piece of happiness in the fact that his daughter at least lived for a bit longer than he thought she did originally. And Novak completes what is one of the most intriguing and heartbreaking arcs of a way that this man's life was completely ruined and wasted because of one random priest's personal vendetta. Now I want to talk about one of the things that I picked up on in the show, which is how the necklace that has become an icon of Orb and is a very prominently featured artifact in chapter 1, 2, and 3. It's sort of like a cursed item and how it simultaneously helps each character that possesses it, but also is a contributing factor in their deaths. Now, we first see it held by Rafal. On the necklace are 3 dots marked that eventually lead Rafal to find the stash with all the research materials and papers and of information about heliocentrism. This necklace helps him discover heliocentrism and helps him research it, but it also eventually causes his death when Novak sees him wearing it and recognizes it as the necklace that the previous heretic that he had killed possessed. This causes Novak to investigate Rafal further, where Rafal is eventually turned in by his adoptive father. The second people we see with this necklace are Akchi and Bedeni. Bedeni sees the necklace one day when trying to figure out the last part of heliocentrism that he doesn't understand. Seeing the necklace spin around helps him determine something about Earth's rotation or axis, and it helps him finalize the theory of heliocentrism. But the same necklace is the one that Novak finds when he searches through their house after the dinner scene, where he then sees this necklace, which is how he finds out that they were researching heliocentrism, and eventually results in them getting captured and their deaths. The final person we see with this necklace is actually Novak. And I think that it represents a wider thing for Novak, because this necklace has helped him find so many heretics in his eyes, so many people that are researching heliocentrism, but it also set him down the path of pursuing heliocentrism more than he otherwise would have. It's time that he could have spent pursuing other parts of life, time that he could have spent with his family, he spends pursuing heliocentrism. And I think that because he's the last wielder of this necklace, it sort of shows the wider path as a whole, leading him to his eventual death in the fire because of how much he pursued heliocentrism. And I just thought it was a really cool thing that I picked up on over the show. It's probably not the most detailed little piece of insight that you'll get, but I thought it was cool and I figured I'd share it with you guys. Next, I want to talk about some of the flaws of Orb. Now, one of the smaller problems with Orb is its pacing is a little bit slow. It's not a very bingeable show. You get a lot of episodes in Orb which are basically entirely philosophical conversations about religion or science or philosophy in general, and it can be a kind of slow show to get through. It took me like 2-3 weeks to get through it all, because you watch like an episode and you have to think on that episode for a while until you can start the next one. But I don't think that's a full detriment to it. I just think that might turn some people off from the show. The second part is definitely the more controversial part, which is the ending of Orb. Now, the ending of Orb is very confusing. Alright, when I first watched it, I sat there for about 30 minutes being like, really? This show that I loved up until then had this weird ending? And at first, it almost ruined the show for me. But looking back and watching some videos about explaining the ending, I think I've come to a realistic interpretation that makes sense for me and makes sense for the show as a whole, which I want to talk about now. The ending of Orb creates a lot of questions, and it seems very confusing on the surface. We follow a new character named Albert for the final 2 episodes, and we get a flashback to his life. Now, when we first see Albert, we can assume that this is after the end of Chapter 3, which is around 35 years since Rafal had died when he was 12 years old. Now, Albert doesn't look that old, and we get a flashback to when he was a child, where we see, albeit a little bit older, Rafal, who is hired as his tutor. Now, this caused a bunch of questions, like why is Rafal here? Why is he tutoring this guy? Did he fake his death? Is this an alternate timeline? But I don't think it's either of those. We see Rafal murder Albert's father because he wouldn't share research materials. And I think the reason for this is Rafal isn't the Rafal that we knew. This Rafal that murders Albert's father symbolizes more of the dangers of the scientific viewpoint that we follow throughout most of the show. A big part of the show is religion and the church versus science. The show obviously makes you favor science and go against the church. The church seem like the bad guys, but I don't think that's the point of the show. I think the point of the show is to show that not one side is correct in everything they do. The religious side obviously does many horrible things. They suppress this research, they kill innocent people, but the science side isn't innocent either. They're not infallible. They also murder people. They murder innocents, like we see with Rafal, this fake Rafal, this tutor Rafal, whatever you want to call him. And I think one of the main points of the show is collaboration, and how collaboration helps everyone. We see this in each major chapter. Collaboration plays some major role. In Chapter 1, we see collaboration in the way that Rafal's father, Potocki, helps him with his calculations, and also how Rafal's adoptive father, Potocki, turns him in and collaborates with Novak. We see it especially in Chapter 2 with having two main characters, or three main characters, you want to include Yolenta, collaborating with each other to research heliocentrism. We see it in Chapter 3 with Draka and Schmidt, who is the captain of the Heretic Liberation Front. I haven't talked about him, I just realized, but Schmidt's a great character, really cool viewpoint, really go-to character. But we see Draka and Schmidt collaborate with each other, and we see all the Heretic Liberation Front collaborate to help Draka escape when they are being attacked by Novak and the Inquisitors. And in Chapter 4, we see the failure of collaboration. We see the drawbacks to the scientific viewpoint, which is that all the knowledge must be shared, and how just because they're on the scientific side doesn't mean they're good people. I think that the point of the show isn't to criticize religion, it isn't to uplift science. I think that the point of the show is something that I want to talk about in a sec. I think that in terms of the final episode, it seems a little bit, I guess, underwhelming. We see that Albert moves on from this, he applies to university, and then we cut to just text talking about how in this year Albert attended university, and then this year Albert became a teacher, and then in this year he taught Copernicus, who is a real life figure, the real life father of heliocentrism. And it seems kind of underwhelming at first, but I think it calls back to something that Rafal says in episode 3, which is that no matter how much Novak or the church or humanity in general try to suppress knowledge, they try to suppress science, it will always continue. Even after this show is finished, this manga is finished, even after you turn off your TV, knowledge will continue to advance, will continue to work. Humanity will continue to think, to question, to investigate, to research. They will continue to pursue knowledge no matter what happens. Even after we've followed all these characters, even after they've all died, their knowledge, their beliefs still pass on. They still keep continuing. We don't have to follow each person that continues this. We have to be content with knowing that their knowledge will continue, that everything will keep going, and that eventually their knowledge will be complete. I want to talk about now the main theme of Orb, because I don't think that the theme is religion bad, science good, history is cool. I think that the theme is the human nature to think, to explore, to research, to investigate, to question. We get a quote in one of the final episodes from Just a Baker, quoting Aristotle or Socrates. He doesn't know which, and I don't know personally which, but the quote talks about how human nature is to think, or it uses some fancy word that I can't quite remember off the top of my head right now. But I think that is the theme of Orb, is that no matter how much suppression, how much violence, how much hurt humans go through, human nature will always be to question. No matter how much the church or a government tries to suppress humans, they will always persevere to find out the truth. And I think that's the main theme of Orb. The main theme of Orb is that no matter what, humanity's spirit to think, to question, to research cannot be crushed. And I think that is such an important thing that can apply to all our lives. No matter what, you shouldn't let your outside circumstances stop you from changing things. It shouldn't stop you from becoming better. It shouldn't stop you from thinking. It shouldn't stop you from questioning the world around you. And I think that's what makes Orb so powerful, is that the ending can be applied to all our lives. And it resonated a ton with me. And while I'm not super pleased that the ending is a little confusing and that you have to rewatch it a couple times and make a couple jumps in logic to fully understand it, I think that the final message is so powerful that I can overlook that. To rate Orb on a scale of 1 to 10, which obviously can't get all my feelings across, but I think there's only one number right for Orb, and that is a 10 out of 10. Thank you all for watching my first ever anime review. Let me know your opinions on Orb, if you like it, if you hate it, down in the comments below. If you have any other recommendations for what anime I should watch, let me know. Hopefully my next video won't take so long to come out as this one did. Orb was not a very bingeable series as I talked about, so it made it a little bit longer to make this video. Plus, I'm still learning how to use editing software, and I'm trying to get better every video. So hopefully I was a little bit better than my top 10 list, but I'm growing. I hope you enjoyed the video nonetheless. Thank you all so much for watching, and yeah, farewell.